My mother-in-law has been inviting my husband's ex-girlfriend to every family event, and she still says what a wonderful wife she would have made. I want to tell you my story, as a 28-year-old woman who has been married to my husband, who is the same age as me, for 2 years now. Before we got married, we dated for 2 years, but we actually knew each other from high school. We didn't start dating right away though. Several years after college graduation, we happened to run into each other at a restaurant. We exchanged phone numbers, started dating, and here we are now. It's been about 4 years since then. Before me, my husband dated a girl named Ella in high school. She was 1 year younger than us and had been dating him since their high school days. While we weren't close, we had many mutual friends, so I often saw them together. After high school graduation, they lost touch when he went to college in another state and couldn't meet frequently. Years later, when we reconnected at that restaurant, I asked about Ella, and he told me they had broken up a year and a half ago. He explained that she had initiated the breakup, saying she wanted to experience more in life and needed time to see the world. She had said she might come back someday, but in reality, she just wanted to date other men without guilt while keeping my husband as a safe backup option. They remained friends after the breakup, but by the time we reconnected, he had minimal contact with Ella. I started seeing him differently too, because he had grown so much since I last saw him in high school. When we reconnected 4 years ago, we quickly became close friends and have maintained a peaceful relationship ever since. According to him, this was something he could never have with Ella. Ella always wanted him to chase after her, believing it made her more attractive. Sometimes she would go out with other men or friends and not contact him for days. She never once considered his feelings. He continued the relationship with her because he was young and immature, and felt he needed to maintain it due to their long history together. Another reason was that his mother absolutely adored Ella. Ella frequently visited my husband's mother, Heather, who was 49, even when they were dating. Every time Ella visited, Heather would shower her with praise and show a completely different attitude. According to my husband, Ella would do the same with Heather, constantly praising her and putting on an act to make an impression. They would talk frequently, mainly about my husband's friends and sometimes about his aunts and cousins. This was something my husband didn't like. Ella was conventionally beautiful, which was another reason why Heather liked her so much. I don't understand why that matters, but I suppose that's just how it is. My husband told me that even after their relationship ended, Heather continued to invite Ella to family gatherings and holiday dinners. He tried to ask his mother to stop inviting Ella, but Heather said she loved Ella and that they had remained friends even after the relationship ended. Therefore, Heather saw no problem in keeping Ella close by. Heather and Ella talked almost weekly and had become true friends. This continued even after I started dating him and he introduced me to his family. It was extremely uncomfortable at first, and I still feel that way. However, there was a reason why I endured this situation for so long. When my husband first introduced me to his family, it was on Christmas Day 4 years ago, and we had been dating for about 8 months. Ella was there too, and she maintained a terribly mean attitude throughout. She kept criticizing my appearance, height, clothes, makeup, and everything else about me. She was cunning enough to make it all seem like jokes, but my husband understood her intentions and tried to protect me. But then Heather intervened, asking me directly if I had a problem with Ella's jokes, putting me in a difficult position. I knew if I said there was a problem, they would say I was feeling insecure or something else that would make my position even worse. So I decided to be strong and told them it didn't bother me. It was a bit of a spiteful response, but when I saw their surprised and irritated reactions, I knew it was the right approach. When we got home, my husband apologized for Heather and Ella's behavior and promised to ask his mother not to invite Ella anymore. But I told him not to do that. I understood what kind of people they were, and I didn't want to lose. I didn't want them to think I felt threatened or insecure. Because the truth was, I didn't. And I felt I needed to prove that. When I explained this to my husband, he was surprised by my opinion but didn't intervene anymore. Since that day, Ella has always been present at family gatherings hosted by Heather, and she always behaves the same way. She makes mean comments, gives compliments that are actually criticisms, and tries to bring up the past. I face everything with courage and act as if I'm not affected. Heather repeatedly says she wishes Ella had been her daughter-in-law, saying she would have made a better wife for my husband. It was unpleasant, but as long as my husband was by my side, I tried not to let their words affect me. Therefore, no matter how much Heather and Ella talked, it had no effect on me. I had been dealing with this for 4 years, and I planned to maintain the same attitude for the next 4 years. I was confident that I wouldn't be the first to lose patience. Now, let me tell you about what happened 3 days ago and how I came to be here. Heather was celebrating her 49th birthday, which was always celebrated with all family and friends. This year, my husband didn't want to go. There was an engagement party for a close colleague on the same day, and he wanted to attend that instead. It was a once-in-a-lifetime engagement celebration for a very close friend, so it was a valid reason. But Heather made him promise to come to the birthday party, and after several days of pleading, my husband gave in and agreed to go. Like other events, Ella was invited and was overdressed for the occasion. Heather was all dressed up too, but at least it was her birthday we were celebrating. My husband and I had planned to leave right after Heather cut her cake to go to his friend's engagement party. Around 5:30 p.m., my father-in-law brought out the cakes, and we were surprised to see there were 2 of them. One had my mother-in-law's name written on it. Neither my husband nor I understood what the second cake was for, and nobody else seemed to know either. While we were waiting for Heather's explanation, Ella surprisingly took charge and grabbed the cake. She grabbed my husband's arm and pulled him to her side. We were both too shocked to do anything, and my husband suddenly found himself the center of attention with everyone staring at him. Then Ella began her explanation about how 10 years ago, on her birthday, my husband had gotten down on one knee and given her an engagement ring. They were both 18 at the time and were planning to go to separate colleges in a few months. 10 years had passed, and Ella was still wearing that ring, which she proudly showed to everyone at the party. Then she gave my husband an awkward hug, but he didn't reciprocate. My mother-in-law encouraged them, saying it was a wonderful day and maybe they could recreate it properly this time. The whole thing was so ridiculous that my husband and I could only stand there with our mouths open. The other guests were the same way, not knowing what to say about such an outrageous situation. Ella kept talking jokingly about how my husband was almost her husband and Heather was almost her mother-in-law, so this was almost their anniversary. She acted as if we just didn't understand the joke. Heather cut the cake and offered it to my husband. She gave the first piece to Ella and tried to give the next one to my husband, but he seemed to snap out of it and dodged when his mother approached with the cake. Heather was surprised by his reaction and asked what was wrong. That's when everything became uncontrollable, and my husband started yelling at her and Ella about what they had done. Years of anger exploded at the party as he called them superficial, foolish, incredibly selfish, and delusional. He said he was ashamed of ever being involved with Ella and of being Heather's son, calling them the most contemptible women he had ever known. I was shocked by my husband's outburst too. After all, he was usually very calm and rarely yelled or got angry. It takes a lot to make him angry, but Heather managed to do it with Ella's help. After his outburst, we quickly left the party and took a taxi to his colleague's house. During the ride, I tried to talk to him, but he was so upset that he said he didn't want to discuss his mother and ex-girlfriend at that moment. So I put the topic aside. However, when we arrived at the other party, his mood improved as he met with friends and colleagues. I felt relieved to see him feeling better. By the time we got home, he was in much better spirits. So I decided to bring up what had happened at the party again, thinking he might want to talk about it. But he said he didn't want to talk and actually told me that I bore some responsibility too. For years, I had encouraged him to stay quiet and let Heather and Ella do as they pleased because I wanted to prove I wasn't bothered by it. I had worn that attitude like a badge of honor, showing how unbothered I was. But I had forgotten that my husband was equally involved and troubled by all of this. While Heather, Ella, and I were all playing our psychological games, it was my husband who was suffering, and none of us had considered his feelings. He said he hadn't expected consideration from his mother or ex-girlfriend, but he had expected it from me. He expressed disappointment that I had prioritized my own feelings over his in this situation. That night, I argued with him, saying he was being too harsh and unfair to me. But now, looking back calmly, I think he was right. Through all of this, I realized I was wrong and he was right. I had been so focused on pretending not to be bothered by Heather and Ella's behavior that I never considered my husband might be suffering too. Therefore, I should have at least allowed the situation to end if that's what he wanted. For years, I had asked my husband to hide his feelings just so I could win a game of pretense with people I didn't even like. In doing so, I had put my most important relationship at risk. I knew I had made a huge mistake and needed to make amends. My husband had been angry with me since the party, but I was trying to act like it wasn't affecting me. This is something I always do, and it's a big problem. Because even when things bother me, my default response is to pretend they don't. I want to be seen as someone who doesn't get affected by anything, someone who stays calm, so I act that way and push my feelings deep inside. Now I realize this is a very poor way to handle things. If I wanted to save my marriage, I knew I needed to fix this behavior. I took a day off work and decided to buy his favorite dinner and a chocolate cake with "I'm sorry" written on it. I prepared everything at home and tried to create as romantic an atmosphere as possible, knowing he appreciated romantic movie-style apologies. I also felt truly sorry for everything I had unintentionally put him through. When he came home from work that night, he was very surprised by what I had prepared. After that, he forgave me. We had an emotional reconciliation, and I cried because I had been so afraid of losing him over this. We talked everything through, cleared things up, and now everything between us is good. I admitted my mistakes and explained that I had always wanted to be seen as calm and detached simply to look cool, because I didn't want to show any weakness to people. That was the real reason behind all the chaos. He understood and respected my decision, but said I should work on improving rather than hiding my emotions. He apologized for being harsh with me too, but I don't think that was necessary. He did it because he's a good person and loves me. When I think about that, I feel very fortunate in life. After dinner, we finally discussed what had happened with Ella and Heather the day before. We hadn't heard from them since the party. After our argument, everything that had happened with my husband was swirling in my head. However, Heather had been persistently sending messages to my husband, demanding he apologize to Ella. She said Ella was deeply hurt by my husband's behavior and was inconsolable. I had to try hard not to roll my eyes while reading the messages Heather sent trying to get an apology for Ella. Heather was trying to make it seem like the cake and anniversary incident was just a joke with no hidden meaning. But I didn't believe that. They must have been aware of how inappropriate and disrespectful they were being toward me by doing such things to a married man. They had planned this to humiliate me at the party. So they couldn't dismiss our feelings by saying it was just a joke and my husband overreacted. The idea that we were being dramatic and rude by exploding and leaving the party was almost laughable. Anyway, my husband was ignoring their messages. Today, after seeing those messages, we decided to cut off all contact with them. We were tired of dealing with their ridiculous behavior and didn't want to be involved anymore. 3 days ago, my husband and I blocked Heather and Ella on all social media, and my husband told his father he didn't want to speak with his mother. His father understood my husband's feelings but refused to get involved in the situation because he loved his wife and couldn't abandon her. He maintained his position as a complete bystander, just as he had done for years. I couldn't agree with my father-in-law's attitude, but there was nothing I could do about it. The next 2 days went smoothly, but today I suddenly got a call from my husband saying we needed to rush to the hospital because his mother had fallen down the stairs and broken her leg. His uncle had called with the news, and we left immediately after hearing it. We arrived at the hospital at the arranged time, but before we could enter, Heather stopped us. She was completely fine, and she and Ella had been waiting to ambush us in the hospital parking lot. Heather told us that lying about being in the hospital was her only way to get her son's attention since he had blocked them everywhere. They hadn't expected me to come, but they simply ignored my presence and started talking to my husband as if nothing was wrong. Ella tried to explain that everything at the party was just a joke, and she never meant to hurt him, while Heather kept agreeing with her. After listening to them briefly, my husband looked at both his mother and ex-girlfriend and told them firmly that he never wanted to see them again. They were shocked, and my husband left with me without another word. As we walked to our car, Heather started screaming, but we didn't stop to listen. I'm sure she was hurling insults at us, but it didn't matter anymore, considering they had resorted to lying about a medical emergency just to see my husband. My husband went home feeling extremely stressed, while I had to return to work. During my shift, I received a message from an unknown number. It turned out to be my mother-in-law, who started yelling before I could even hang up. I was caught off guard since I was at work, otherwise I wouldn't have answered at all. All I could hear were her screams and some insulting words. I couldn't understand why she was angry at me when it was her own actions that had pushed her son away. I blocked her number and tried to continue with my day. When I got home around 6 p.m., I was able to talk with my husband. He told me he had blocked everyone close to his mother, including his uncle, because it became clear she would do anything to force him to forgive her and talk to her. This was all we could do for now. We couldn't file for a restraining order since they weren't exactly threatening or stalking us. My husband told his father about what happened today, but his father still refused to get involved. That was his choice, and since my husband loves his father, I wasn't going to say anything for now. However, I couldn't help but think that this wasn't how a good father should act. At the very least, he could talk to his wife and support his son, but he wouldn't even do that. My husband loves his father, but his father had never protected his son when it came to Heather. I had stayed quiet about the relatives out of respect for their relationship, but otherwise, I had so much to say about this selfish, foolish family. I couldn't understand how my wonderful husband could be part of such a family. A week later, we decided to file for a restraining order against Heather and Ella because of what they did, or at least tried to do. Let me explain more precisely what they did, or at least attempted to do. It was 3 days ago, on Thursday, when I was heading home from work. Every Thursday, I would treat myself to a frappuccino at the cafe near my office, a small reward for getting through the week. Last Thursday, I was about to do the same, but the moment I stepped into the cafe, Ella and Heather rose from their seats and approached me as if they had been waiting. Before I could even react, they both threw their coffee in my face. Then Ella grabbed some whipped cream from her cup and flung it into my hair. I stood there, completely stunned and unable to move. After a few moments, the cafe staff rushed over to help me. They did everything they could, wiping off the coffee and cream from my hair and clothes. I was so grateful for their kindness. I appreciated both the staff who took time from their work to help me and the other customers who waited patiently. We tried to clean up the mess, but my clothes were still sticky and uncomfortable, and my hair was in terrible condition. Thankfully, the coffee wasn't hot, or I could have been severely burned. Several people who were there came to check if I was all right. When one person asked if I wanted to call the police, I decided that would be best. I reported Ella and Heather and told the police what they had done. However, they only received a warning and had to pay a fine since their actions were considered a minor offense and I wasn't seriously injured. Still, my clothes were ruined by coffee stains and couldn't be worn to work again. My husband wanted to tell his whole family about this incident and suggest they distance themselves from Ella and her mother. But when he noticed I just wanted to forget about it and not discuss it further, he changed his mind. To be honest, this incident shocked me deeply. It might sound silly, but this incident made me think about many things. If the situation had escalated, they could have easily done something worse than throwing coffee in my face. If they had really wanted to, they could have caused me serious harm. They knew my daily routines from my social media and knew our address. Things could have gotten much worse. This year, my husband and I had been financially stable and were already thinking about moving. This incident made that decision final. We were also thinking about having children and planning to start trying soon. However, we would never let my in-laws to meet our children. After the cafe incident, since my father-in-law took no action, we cut off contact with him too. My husband had a heated argument with him and then completely severed ties. Personally, I felt relieved that I would never have to see their faces or hear their voices again. I often wondered if I should have just pretended to enjoy my mother-in-law's jokes and let everything slide, or if I should have spoken up directly to her and my husband's ex-fiancé from the start. A year has passed since those events, and my husband and I have started a new life in a new town. We moved to a quiet residential area about 30 minutes from our old house, and now we are living peacefully. Shortly after moving, I changed jobs and now work in marketing at a small game development company. I am enjoying building a new career while using my previous experience. What makes the biggest difference for me is being able to work in an environment where I can express my emotions honestly. My husband also transferred to a new department and seems more energetic than before. His colleagues are warm and welcoming, and we socialize with their families during holidays. We have become particularly close with another couple who live in our apartment building, often enjoying meals together on weekends. Recently, I heard about Heather and Ella through a mutual acquaintance. I was told that Heather has been telling everyone in the neighborhood about my husband's behavior, playing the victim. However, this attitude has backfired, and even her longtime friends have started distancing themselves from her. I also heard that Ella's reputation suffered because of this incident, and she had to change jobs. Strangely, I feel nothing in my heart about this news. It is neither hatred nor joy. I can simply accept it as something that happened in the past. Recently, we received wonderful news when my pregnancy test came back positive. Being blessed with a new life has changed something within me. Instead of dwelling on the past, my heart naturally turns toward the future with our coming child. My husband is slowly trying to rebuild his relationship with his father. The other day, he received an email from his father expressing regret for not putting his son's life first. My husband quietly told me that while it might not happen immediately, he hopes to rebuild their relationship over time. I have learned some important things over this past year. I learned that no family is perfect. What matters is the willingness to understand and support each other. And above all, the importance of being honest with your own feelings. Now, spring winds are blowing outside my window. As I feel the beginning of a new season, I whisper thank you in my heart. I am grateful for this experience that has made our marriage stronger and our bond deeper. I can now proudly say that an ending is also a beginning. Our new story is just beginning. If you enjoyed this video, please like and do not forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video.